want to short
Yeah,
more where we're from?
Yeah, and maybe when you serve, what, what committees. Okay.
My name is Annette Dubas. I served in the legislature from 2007 to 2014. My hometown is Fullerton. I represented District 34, which is currently Senator Friesen represents that district. So it's Nance, Merrick, Hamilton, and a portion of Hall County. While I was in the legislature, I served on the Ag Committee, General Affairs, Natural Resources, and Transportation and Telecommunications. And my final 2 years in the legislature, I was chair of the Transportation and Telecommunications.
Okay. I'm Kathy Campbell from Lincoln. Had represented District 25. I was elected to the legislature in 2008. So I took office in 2009 and then finished at the end of 2016. While I was in the legislature, I served on Transportation Committee, Health and Human Services, and Banking and Commerce committees, the Exec Committee, and Long Range Planning, which we hope to give a plug for here during our conversations, and served as the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee while I was there.
I'm Roy Baker in District 30, and I want to make sure you understand. I'm leaving after one term, and that's not because of any disillusionment. I mean, it was kind of the way it was always going to be, but I have no regrets. I do it all again, no question. And, Merv knows his way around, but the rest of you think, well, how am I going to figure out what to do and all that? I had the advantage of my second year. Kathy Campbell sat beside me, so I did ask her what the situation was. First, you have Jeremy Norquist, so I had things get rejiggled after 2 years. So my experience was different. The first 2 years was different than years 3 and 4. In the first 2 years, I was on the Education Committee and on Kathy's Health and Human Service Committee. And then in years 3 and 4, I got booted off the Education Committee. And so I was on Banking and Insurance, and I went with the Judiciary Committee. So.
I'm Senator Vickie McDonald. I served from 2001 to 2009. I represented 9 counties, and I lived in St. Paul, Nebraska, which was north of Grand Island. But I had Burwell and Greeley and Ely, and Albion, and Carroll, all those kind of almost to the sand hills. I served up a lot of committees in there, 7.5 years because I started out as an appointee and then ran a couple of terms myself. I started out with education. I was on the Ag Committee, Natural Resources, Judiciary, Performance Audit, was on the Exec Committee. Let's see, I think I was on about 8 or 9 committees. At the end, I chaired General Affairs, and so I had a lot of chance to be a part of a lot of different issues that come along. So you know a little bit about a lot of things.
One caveat I just want to mention too, once we open it up to you for questions, OpenSky Policy Institute is a non-for-profit, a C3. So I need to ask you to avoid any questions that would give you an advantage over your opponent. So we can't ask about, what did you do on the campaign or certain things like that. So this is just really what I wish I had known as a candidate about the legislative experience. So I just want to ask you to refrain from those comments in this discussion. So you've all, our panel has all served in a leadership role in the legislature. Please discuss how you navigated your role as a leader and what strategies and leadership skills you think are most effective or most important to be an effective leader. Annette, you want to kick this up?
Okay, well, I had the opportunity to serve for 2 years as a committee chair, so I still felt like I've got a lot to learn here. But this might be a common theme as I answer some other questions. It's about communication, and really being open, making sure that your committee members know what's going on, keeping them informed, posted and what have you. So basically just communicating, making sure your committee members have the information that they need either prior to the committee hearing or once the hearing is over with. A lot of times questions are raised during the hearing that the senators want more information. So the committee chair's job is to make sure that whoever said they were going to follow up and provide that information, that it's done. And then a lot of the heavy lifting happens after the hearings, and if the senator has prioritized that bill, what needs to be done, get the bill out of hearings. So again, just constantly working with your fellow senators, working with the senators that introduce that bill, communicating with them, making sure that your staff has things organized so that all the notices and everything get done the way they need to do, and reports are filed with the committee clerks and the clerk's office. Legislature's office, excuse me. So it's just a lot of organizing the time, looking at the bills and determining, okay, this is a bill that's going to have a lot of testifiers. It's a bill that's generating a lot of emotion or a lot of attention. So, what's the best way to schedule that bill? Take the whole, committee chairs have the discretion of setting up their committee hearings the way they want, but you don't want to put a highly controversial bill, two highly controversial bills maybe on the same day because you're until midnight. So it's just kind of using those, tactics and figuring out what's the best way to schedule those bills. Everybody that wants to testify, everybody that wants to participate gets that chance to do so. Communication and organization.
Annette mentioned it, but also building a relationship with the committee members who followed me on as chair of Health and Human Services, but it is also having a relationship with a number of the senators to be able to respond to their questions. But it also is, I think, understanding how the flow of bills go to the floor and working with the speaker. That becomes extremely important. So you can say, you need to kind of watch out for this bill, or this bill is going to need more time. But most of the committee chairs spend time with the speaker, looking at the flow of bills in their committee. The chair of the committee also is really the contact for the media on very large bills. So you get used to doing that. It is a tremendous amount of work to be a chair, and it has a lot to do with the amount of time and effort that you're going to put into that job. It is time consuming and beyond that. And then in between sessions, you, the chair, also deal with human, in our case, the human services referrals of interim studies. So then you have to determine, what are you going to study? What are you going to say to a senator, for instance? I'm really sorry, but Health and Human Services has 23 interim studies, and there's no way that a small office group could do it. So you're going to need to do the research, but you are in charge of shepherding those through. And if a senator wants a hearing, then setting that up during the interim.
I'm going to largely pass on this question. I was not a committee chairman. I would say, though, as a committee member, looking at what I liked in the way of performance from the committee chairman, Kathy Campbell was a consummate committee chairman. I mean, she kept us informed. She developed that personal relationship she was talking about. I would further say that, as you folks, except for Merv coming in, would be freshmen, and normally committee chairmanship's not in the cards. Although it did happen last year. As you know, the deck was kind of stacked, and we were going to help people that the deals were made became committee chairs, and that's probably not a good idea. You need to have someone that has some more experience and knowledge to be a committee chair. Vickie.
Well, I'm going to look at it from a little different perspective. As a committee chair, I think it's very important that the chair not insert their, what do I want to say, their personality, their focus on, what that subject is. Let's face it, there are certain things that you support, do not support. But when when it comes as a committee chair, you have to put all those aside and say, hey, listen, we need to give each and every bill the same amount of consideration, even if the chairman doesn't like the bill. It's something that you need to make sure that you do not use your own influence and personality to either assert that bill or to deny that bill. So you really need to be focused on and trying to do that.
So,
That's key.
thank you. Can you talk about your greatest challenge and most rewarding experience?
The greatest challenge, and was probably not going to a surprise to many people who followed it. I spent 3 years working on Medicaid expansion, which was probably the greatest challenge that I faced in terms of getting people to understand the issue. And while we never were able to enact that, I think we did provide a lot of education on how Medicaid works in the state, who's eligible, who's not, that type of thing. Greatest satisfaction, really have two, Senator Dubas, and it's great. I'm sitting between people who were my seatmates while I was in the legislature. We'll remember we worked on the prenatal issue, and that's probably, there are times in your legislative career that when you retire and do a lot of other things, you're still going to be able to bring that experience or that moment or that time up in your mind. And the prenatal issue was one of them because it had such a diverse coalition that came together to support it, and that's probably the one I remember the most.
I think what I felt the biggest challenge the last 2 years was working in an increasingly partisan environment. You know, I have a theory that most Nebraskans are somewhere in a broad mainstream. Sometimes the people we hear from and sometimes people who end up in office are outside of that mainstream and have you believe that their way is right and the other side is evil. And that was sort of the environment we worked in the last couple of years. And so the one side didn't have enough to dominate, but at the same token, the minority side had enough to filibuster. So we had more filibusters the last 2 years than any time in the history of the legislatures. That was, I guess, the biggest challenge.
Because Nebraska is a unicameral, the R's and D's need to go away. When you're there, you're not representing a party, you're not representing the governor, you're representing your district. And you need to always remember that as you work with senators, maybe you're a rural senator. You know what? You need to work with your urban senators, because there's going to be times that urban senator is going to need your expertise. And so as you move along in your career, you need to make sure that you compromise. And that is the key, because no one gets anything done if you can't compromise. You know, maybe your idea is the best and your fellow senators feels their ideas are the best. But you know what, at the end of the day, everybody has to give a little. And that makes a great senator. You're able to compromise and give a little.
When I was thinking about what was the most challenging, I can't think of anything that I would use the word challenge with. I mean, certainly I had to learn to be a much better time manager and be more organized. You have a lot of things coming at you, a lot of different directions that all need your attention right away. So it's learning to rely on staff and just being prepared. Being prepared for your committee hearings, being prepared for your own bills when you're introducing them, being prepared for floor debate. So it's definitely, and it's not when the legislative session is over with that you're done. We're defined as part-time legislators, but that's a myth. That's a myth. I mean, you're 24/7 throughout 365 days a year. Once you're a senator, you're on. The experience that told me that was right after I was newly elected and I was heading back to Lincoln after a weekend. and I just had some pajama pants and an old sweatshirt on. But I stopped in a grocery store in my district on the way back to Lincoln. I was gonna pick up some stuff from my apartment. And all of a sudden I realized people knew who I was. So pajama pants and a sweatshirt probably wasn't what I should be walking around in public, because you now are a known commodity, and you want people to be able to come up to you and talk to you. So it's just a lot of figuring out how you balance your home, your job, your family with the legislature. So, you know, that would be the challenge. The rewarding experiences are far too many to mention. And I found that they continue even once you leave the legislature. I had a couple pieces of legislation that I'm particularly proud of. One that dealt with the Keystone Pipeline and setting up a public hearing process for that pipeline. And I actually got to see that legislation put into action through the Public Service Commission. Another one, I just had a child welfare provider. I was at a meeting here a few weeks ago who talked to me about a piece of legislation that I'd introduced that created a foster care review rate committee. And that committee is still in place. They moved on from foster care rates and now they're looking at other services. So that policy is still in place. And my breastfeeding bill. I would have to say that's probably one that I'm really proud of. Nebraska was one of the only states in the nation left where you could actually get a ticket if you were nursing your child out in public. And so it took me two runs at it, but I was able to get that legislation passed, and I'm pretty proud of that. So knowing that, you know, when you're in the moment and working on legislation, you're only thinking about the moment, but really you're putting policies in place that you hope will continue to serve the state for many years to come. And when you actually get to see that take place once you're outside of the legislature, it's kind of a neat feeling.
I'm gonna ask one more question, and then I'm gonna open it up. In an era of term limits, what is the legislator's role in addressing challenges that will take longer than 8 years to solve? So for example, we're going to hear from David Drews this afternoon from UNO, who's going to be talking about some of the demographic challenges that we're going to be facing. So what are the opportunities and barriers to long-term strategic thinking and planning, and what recommendations do you have? Baker, you want to start on that?
Sure, and I'll steal the thunder, but you know, I think Kathy alluded to it earlier, but the idea of a planning committee that meets with recognizing that we don't have the opportunity, since no one can be there more than 2 terms, the opportunity for visioning out further than that doesn't happen normally. I mean, the nature of term limits has made everybody somewhat co-equal as far as running for re-election, and so you get short-sighted and think, all right, how do I get elected? How do I get re-elected? And sometimes I've seen people do things that I don't think they should do just to be on the right side as far as getting votes. And that doesn't serve the people of the state long-term. So I think the planning committee is probably the best tool we have to do that. Other than that, if we get rid of term limits, or making term limits to 6-year terms or something like that, that would be an improvement.
Well, a lot of these problems have been there for a long time, you know, and no one has the magic answer of how we're going to fix that problem. One problem creates another problem, or one solution creates another problem, because if we had the tax thing solved, we'd have had it solved years ago. If we had the revenue problem solved, we'd have solved it years ago. So there really are no new issues that haven't come around year and year and year again. One of the things, I'm just going to talk about the challenges. I was appointed, and you know what? I had never served public office. I didn't know much about the legislature. My husband died. I was appointed, and all of a sudden I'm a state senator. And so, because I don't really know the difference between a Republican and a Democrat, and I swear not to. And so when it came time for a bill to be voted on, the governor calls me into his office and he says, you know what, I want you to vote my way. And, you know, many people would say, okay, you were appointed by the governor, you better vote the governor. And I said, you know what, I'm sorry, you got me here, but I have to vote my district, and my district is not going to agree with you. So I'm sorry, I have to not vote for it, vote for what you're wishing. You know what? He never called me back in his office ever again. He knew that he probably didn't have any control over me. And that's okay. And the other thing was, not even facing election, I voted to raise taxes. And I'm a Republican, and that was hard to do. But it was the right thing to do that year. We needed to do it. And we, of course, you know, having the governor being partisan and we're nonpartisan, we overrode him, and we overrode him overwhelmingly. And of course, you know, the thing is, okay, you're not going to get reelected. We all got reelected because it was the right thing to do. And I think you have to remember that. Do what's the right thing to do. Sometimes it's not politically correct in certain climates, but never forget, do the right thing.
You know, prior to term limits, newly elected senators kind of had the luxury of coming into the legislature and just kind of sitting back and observing and, you know, asking questions and taking a little time, but that no longer is the case. And once you are elected and you're in the legislature, you hit the ground running and you jump in. You know, you have 4 years at the least, 8 years at the most to really get up to speed and be an effective senator. And so you don't have the luxury of just kind of sitting back and observing. I think surrounding yourself with experienced staff that understand the issues, staff that has some of the institutional knowledge. I think for me, that was a focus for me, and it served me very well. They gave me a lot of helping me avoid some of the pitfalls and, you know, making some mistakes or saying some things that I probably shouldn't have said, and helping me understand and really do what I needed to do. So finding those confidants that you can go to, whether it's, you know, the clerk of the legislature, building those relationships with the fiscal office and the clerk's office and the legislative research office. Those people are your friends, and they're there in an objective fashion. They just want to make sure that the legislature runs effectively and efficiently, and that you can be the best senator that you can be. So don't think, well, I'm not a senator yet, so I shouldn't be talking to these people. You should be talking to anybody and everybody that you can talk to that's going to help you on day one when you are sworn in and you walk in. So, you know, you just don't have that luxury anymore of kind of sitting back. And so, you know, learning the rules of the legislature, learning who the players are, and finding people, kind of finding your little kitchen cabinet, so to speak, of who are the people that I know are going to be my confidants, my trusted confidants, that will tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear, that you can bounce those ideas off of, that you can work with. And then I also think, you know, sometimes when you're talking about big legislation like tax policy or revenue or things like that, you know, that doesn't happen in one legislative session. That doesn't happen in two legislative sessions. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years to really develop a good comprehensive piece of policy. You know, you've got a few years left to go, and it's not ready to carry over the finish line. So build those relationships with your colleagues, with those new senators coming in, you know, so that when you're gone, there's a few people who can kind of pick up the ball and keep moving it forward. Because if you haven't cultivated those relationships or helped build that coalition that's going to continue to work on that, it just kind of gets dropped, and then somebody has to start basically all over again. So be sure that when you're working on, you know, any legislation, whether it's a policy that is big and comprehensive, that you bring a good, solid working group of people together that you can keep it moving forward once you're gone.
And when you get there, you will not believe how quickly 8 years goes by. I think, oh, I've got 8 years, yes. And it goes by so very quickly. I totally agree and want to underscore what Senator Dubas is saying. It's important as you develop an area that you really want to work on, and you build relationships across all the senators, and particularly you start building relationships with those who come behind you, who can carry on that information. What was really sad is that Senator Mello and I had worked a number of all 8 years together on a number of issues. And one of those issues that we spent the last couple of years, as he was the appropriations chair and I was HHS, was dealing with intergenerational poverty across the state and how we really don't have any data on that. We don't really know how to address that. Did a 2-year study of it with 25 advisors, citizen advisors, brought out a report and a number of recommendations. And unfortunately, the senators that we tried to bring along had no interest. And there it's now it's being picked up a little bit by some community folks and looking at it. But it illustrates how important it is to build those relationships. And Senator McDonald is totally correct. What we have seen from the outside, what we have lost is that ability to reach across, because one day we're going to be on the same side and the next day we're going to be on the opposite. And as Senator Baker said, it appeared, at least to an outsider looking in, that the last couple of years, boy, once you decided you and I aren't on the right side, we're not on the right side for the rest of the time. And that is not how it worked the first 6 years that I was there. No doubt about it. I mean, coalitions changed, and it was built on issues, and it was built on what was the best for the state in your districts. I totally agree with that. And I would encourage you, I brought a copy with me, but if you have not had a chance to read the article that was on the front page of the Lincoln Journal written by Don Walton about would George Norris be surprised about what has happened in the legislature. I told Don Walton, who's the columnist that follows the legislature, you'll all meet him at some point. And I told him it ought to be required reading every first day of every session of the legislature to remind us of what was the intent as we build this unicameral system, which I think is the best in the country. So don't lose it.
Well, I have more questions, but I want to open it up and give you an opportunity to ask your own. And if you don't have any, I'll fill in, but Bob.
I have two.
Okay.
One of which, and this is from an observation of many years, obviously I'm the oldest one of the pack. And so I've been watching the legislature for a lot of years. I used to have an office right across the street. And something that seems to have been developing over the last several years is the lack of a collegial attitude, friendliness and so forth, where people could disagree without getting ready to beat each other up. What's happened and what can be done to change that? Now, when you're thinking about that, question number two is, one of the first items of business of the legislature is to create its own rules. And I believe Senator Baker might have mentioned it. The loquacious legislator from Omaha seems to be able to tie up the pack over there with his ability to filibuster. What can be done or what should be done to rein that in just a little bit with a rule change?
Well, I'm sorry, but Bernie was my favorite senator. And the reason that he forces people, number one, to read bills. Do you understand the bills that are up there? There was a time when he was not there, and many of the senators didn't even know what was in their bills. He creates an atmosphere where he looks at each and every word, shall, may, so that you understand what that bill actually means. So he does a very good service. The other thing is, Senator Chambers stops bad legislation from happening. I know if you're for the legislation that he's filibustering, you don't believe that. But there comes a time when he is stopping something from happening that you don't want to happen. So in that case, you're for what he does. So we need to make sure that there is full and fair debate. And I think that the thought is from the media saying, okay, we need to stop all this debate. It's not necessary. Let's just move on. It's the wrong thing to do. We need that full and fair debate, because there comes a time that you'll believe that, you know what, we need to stop this bad legislation. Without Ernie there, that won't happen.
And the fact that we're a one-house legislature, we don't have another house that piece of legislation is going to go to. we do need that extended discussion and debate. Ernie is an effective senator because Ernie knows the rules. And Ernie follows the rules. Ernie does not do anything that is outside of the rules. He uses the rules to his advantage. I would tell you today, the minute you walk out of here, you go online or you go over to the Capitol and you get a copy of the rule book and you start reading it right now. And you learn those rules and you learn how to use them to your benefit on legislation that you're supporting, to your benefit on legislation that you're opposing. And if you can match Ernie on understanding those rules, you'll be able to do exactly what he does, whether you like it or not, depending on what side of the issue. So I wouldn't be necessarily supportive of any change to the filibuster rule or anything like that, because again, because we're a one-house legislature, that bill is not going to go to another house for further review and further debate and discussion. We need to have a slower process because we are a one-house legislature. And in response to your first part of your question, the senators are the ones who control the collegiality. And I would encourage each of you that when you enter the legislative chamber, you enter it with an open mind. That you go in with it, leave all your preconceived notions about who your colleagues are, the issues that are going to come before you, leave them all at the door and keep yourself open. You're going to come in there with your own particular expertise and knowledge of issues, but you're going to get exposed to so many things that you never even knew existed. I'm a farmer rancher. The issues that I became involved in and are still my passion today are behavioral health and child welfare. I don't have a behavioral health and child welfare background, but I was exposed to those and became very interested in them and have since remained in that arena. So I would just tell you, I made some of my dearest friends are from the other side of the aisle. They taught me a lot. They taught me to stand firmer in my resolve for the things that I believed in, or they taught me that maybe I could change my mind a little bit and I could see things from a different perspective. So if I hadn't had an open mind, if I hadn't been willing to reach out and talk to them and work with them, I hope that I'm a better person today because of that experience. So you're going to get help from either your party or certain people that will help you get elected. But as Senator McDonald said, once you're there to represent the people that sent you there, that vote actually voted for you. And your allegiance, in my estimation, your allegiance and your obligation is to them and to put policy in place that serves Nebraskans, not any particular special interest, not any particular party. So the legislature has total control over what happens inside those glass doors, in my estimation.
I would say that I think there is pretty good collegiality among senators, despite the spectrum of dogmas and beliefs. I mean, it's like almost like being part of a football squad together. Because you've been through shared experiences, that camaraderie exists, and you have good relationships with virtually everybody in the legislature. Murph, do you think?
I think it's like a high school class.
Yeah.
49. And some people you gravitate towards because you have common interest, but I don't think there was a particular hatred or anything else in it. And, disagreements at times, strong verbal at times, but I think as Senator Campbell said, people have a tendency to come back together. You have to, maybe was shared. You have to. You have too many things coming up.
Back to Bob's comments about Senator Chambers. If I have any problem with him, he talks too much. He spends too much of the clock, sometimes when it's not necessary. But he's been, I value him. He's taught the rest of us. He taught the rest of us about the rules and how to use the rules, and he's probably responsible for some of the rest of us filibustering things because he's taught us how we can do it.
And I think when you talk about him talking too much, it might not be this bill that he is thinking about working on. It's what's coming a couple of bills later. So that if he could stop the process of this point, at this bill, you know, it's gonna delay what's gonna happen down the road. So it might not be the bill that you think he's debating against. It's something down that's coming. He doesn't want to get to it.
For the record, I've gotten along with him for nearly 35 years.
The only thing I would say, and I'm sure the two senators here are talking about the collegiality was there. But I have to tell you that in talks that I do in the community as a former senator, or people who talk with me, their observation is that the collegiality is not as prominent, and it's not there, and they don't like that. It's amazing to me the number of comments that I've had this year from people, and the public goes, why are they not getting along? So when Bob asked that question, there are other constituents across the state who I think are asking that, and they're expecting different approach, maybe is the right word. Other question?
Well, I'm still thinking about Senator Chambers, because as I go door to door, people will comment about him, and I tell them that I hear that people like you, that he does a very good job and he is a value. But then when they see on television, as I have seen this last winter, you turn it on to see what's going on, and Ernie's singing a Harry Belafonte song, and you think, this is what we're paying our senators for? And you know, the general public is, well, they want to raise, and they're sitting around singing. So that's the perception people see when they turn on any TV to see what the legislature is doing. So it's, of course, they're not going to leave it on very long. They'll quickly change the channel. So it's the perception of the general public then is not a good one.
And it never has been.
Well, no, and to me, it's a
Creative term
shame.
limits because of him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it seems like a waste. I mean, I understand his intent in following the rules and using the rules, but to me, it's like he's making, when you just see that, it's like he's making a fool out of everybody else, or even the whole state, because he can stand there and sing a song and use up 10 minutes or whatever he's allowed. Like, no wonder nothing gets done.
Don, I would say, if you get elected, you better not go and tell him those things.
Well, this is the perception people have of the
I
general
know,
public.
he knows that.
You
He knows that.
understand him
Yes.
and how it's working, but the people that do not, which is most everybody,
I
That's
agree.
what they
That
see.
is the perception.
The thing is, for Senator Chambers and the public, you know, I tell a lot of people, you do not see the totality of this person. And it's like if they turned in on the 10 minutes that I'm talking about a poem, or I'm making some funny reference, they go, well, geez, what is Senator Campbell talking about today? The point being that we have had the opportunity to see the totality of that person, who would help us in situations, who would come up and talk, or in a particularly thorny debate, would sit down and say, these are the points that you need to work on. I agree, Senator Chambers is a great teacher. And the last year I was in the legislature, he decided to have the first filibuster on a bill I had at the very beginning to teach the freshmen a point. And he came up to me and he said, you know, I really like you a lot. And he said that on the floor, but he goes, I think we should use this as a teaching. Well, that wasn't a lot of fun for me, let me tell you. But he's very honest with you. And that's, I feel sorry that the public doesn't see the totality of a very gentle person, actually, and of the old school gentleman who always ran ahead, opened the door, was always so gracious. And the public doesn't see that.
There's some
I agree
things,
with you.
there's some things the public will never understand. And until you're inside the glass, you don't understand either. And, you know, this is an old cliche saying that making policy is like making sausage, you know, you don't want to see it made. And so it's just something that's hard to, he does serve a purpose and a very effective purpose. But also, if you don't engage with him, you know, he pushes people's buttons. If people would just sit down, leave their lights off, walk off the floor, it wouldn't, in some respects, wouldn't go as far as it does. But he says things that some people will go, just like, I'm not gonna let that one go. And so, you know, I just don't turn on your button. Just don't respond. Let him have his say, let him do his thing, and move on.
We have such an open system with the unicameral, and you don't realize what we have here as much until you start going to conferences with other state legislators. And as a freshman, I had a chance to go to one, and I was talking to a woman from Michigan, and I said, how many bills did you introduce this year? And she said, oh, I didn't introduce any bills, because we have to subject our ideas to the party, and they determine whether the idea is going to go forward and who will sponsor it. So she said, I didn't sponsor any of my ideas. And she said, how many bills did you have? I said, I think I had 15 or 16. She went, oh, really? We saw other legislators get up and talk about the fact that they were a chair of a committee and of the same political party, and that political party decided that they didn't like the way that chairman was doing. So the speaker fired the chairman and moved them out of their office. Folks, what we have here is a jewel when you go across the country and talk to other legislators. Every bill here gets a hearing. The public, you know, it's messy, it's very messy, but they get to see that process played out in full and not in political caucuses where choices are made that senators don't have any, you know, say in. So.
It is ironic, while you're running for office, the media will publish who's a R, who's a D, who's a libertarian, and you know, you'd think if it's nonpartisan, these discussions wouldn't come up, but everybody knows what you are, and you know, people, if you're a Republican, you're gonna try to play to that base because there's more Republicans than Democrats in most districts in the state. So it is ironic, though, that so much is made of what you are running for a nonpartisan legislative seat.
How often can you switch parties?
And I probably started by 2000, you came in after that. You know what? It wasn't a big deal. Nobody knew whether you're Republican or Democrat.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't ever, you know, the tickets, people would ask you, and you know what they'd ask, are you Republican or Democrat? I said, you know what? The state of Nebraska doesn't matter. It's you do what's right for the for your district. It's not run by the party, and we do not have party caucuses. You know, you do what's right. And so not too long ago, I'm the executive director of the former state senators, and I was getting some information off of the website. And then, and only then, did I see something that I have never seen before. It listed all of the senators with an R or a D behind them. Never before have I ever seen that. I was totally dismayed, so totally upset. You know what? That's not important. But for some now, that is important. That needs to go away. You know what? I never knew what people on the floor were because I didn't care. I didn't care if you're Republican or Democrat. I only cared about doing what was right. And that's why the governor never came to me, because he didn't know where I was going to vote. I was going to vote my conscience. I was going to vote what was right.
I want to make one quick comment. I'm a Democrat in a very Republican district. I won my first time. I had token opposition my second time around, and I won with over 80% of the vote. So as a Democrat in a highly Republican district, I went out and worked for my constituents, and they rewarded me with a second term. So I think that speaks to what the unicameral is about.
And when I was appointed, I was the first woman to be appointed or to even have a seat in my district, District 41. And when I left that seat, I supported another woman, but she happened to be a Democrat in a pretty much totally Republican district also. and she won. Because they knew that that particular person wasn't going to run just because they were a Democrat. They were going to do what was right. And I think that's the key of the whole thing. Forget it, the R's and the D's. Do what's right. You will be rewarded for that.
Well, I'm sorry to cut this off, but we're over time. So help me thank our panel, and if you want to grab someone, we have a couple minutes, so you can clear your plates, refresh your drinks, use the restroom, and then we're back at
Sometimes I wonder.
what time? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. So make it quick.
I'll leave the